Think of the sun slowly setting beyond the horizon, coloring the sky orange and pink. The heat slowly gives way to a pleasant coolness, while a light breeze plays with the branches of trees along the main street of some small town. The street was just as busy with people returning home after a day's labor, some strolling with their children, others walking their dogs. But then there came flashing lights, blindingly bright, of a police car in vividly red and blue glows, destroying such tranquility. People passing by started stopping, watching with curiosity, sensing that something unusual was happening. A policeman was a tall figure with serious marks on his face after serving in the police and an expression that showed no compromise in authority. Walked up to a young woman standing next to an old car. Each step he made was as heavy as if some form of mission was to be carried out. Badges littered his uniform, and his belt was weighted down by all the tools of the trade. A radio baton used in the exertion of authority. He moved with precision, refined a man who expected instant and absolute obedience from others. The young woman, Amara, simply stood, smiling even, though her hands were cuffed to a lamppost by the road. She seemed composed and rational despite the scene unfolding around her. "You thought you could just park here, huh?" The voice of the policeman cut through the air, with a metallic note of arrogance and hostility in it. His voice was loud, as if he wanted everybody to hear his words. "Parking here is reserved for special people, and you clearly don't belong to that group." Amara looked up at the policeman. Her eyes were calm, slightly ironic. She showed neither fear nor aggression, only confidence in her actions. Her posture was steady, her face radiated tranquility. She spoke clearly, without hesitation. "I only stopped for a minute to help an elderly lady cross the street. There's nothing wrong with that, is there?" Her voice was quiet and steady, without a trace of fear or doubt. The policeman, apparently drunk with his own power, scowled and then again looked at Amara. His eyes glimmered with a cold fire. He was so sure he was right and could do whatever he wished. He felt he represented the law and, therefore, his actions would never be called to account. He didn't even notice the small camera installed on a lamppost nearby, which was live-streaming everything to the internet. Now, all of his actions were under public scrutiny. "Rules are rules," he grumbled, not having anything else to say. His voice grew sharper. His movements became nervous. He drew out a notebook and began to write in it, every now and then stopping to look up at Amara, as if attempting to get some reaction. But Amara even didn't try to argue. Standing still, she simply stood there while he wrote on the ticket, gesticulating and murmuring to himself, as if someone was contesting his authority. There had already formed quite a cluster of curious onlookers, who were observing all the drama. Some discussed in low tones, some filming on their phones, but most people just waited to see what would happen next. Out of a sudden, a crowd of people appeared from behind the corner. They hadn't appeared here accidentally. Their curiosity and the injustice they saw in the network broadcast had driven them here. They were standing, filming everything on their smartphones. Some even started a live stream. They were a witness that something was wrong in the proceedings. The policeman, too involved with his investigation and showcasing of authority, did not notice them yet. He leaned closer to Amara as his voice took a new low. "You will see how one does it if there had been a misbehavior." Amara continued to look at him silently. Her gaze was clear and focused, as if she was waiting for this storm of arrogance to finally subside. She understood that the policeman felt secure, armed and in uniform, while she was just an ordinary citizen. But she also knew that power was not always defined by weapons or uniforms. Just then, someone in the crowd coughed loudly. The policeman turned and, for the first time, noticed a dozen pairs of eyes watching him with frank curiosity and disapproval. "What's going on here?" shouted one of the onlookers, a tall man in a red t-shirt who looked extremely determined. "Why are you harassing her? This is just wrong." The policeman hesitated. He felt the situation slipping out of his hands but regained his composure. "This is police business, move along." He waved his hand to get rid of the crowd, but the people didn't move away. They remained standing, filming and live streaming. Others started shouting for Amara. "You say she broke the rules?" A gray-haired old lady moved from the crowd and responded confidently. Though elderly, her demeanor said much as she approached the policeman with resolution. But I was the elderly lady that she helped across the street. This young woman is a hero and not some sort of rule breaker. You, sir, owe her an apology. The policeman did not know what to say. He looked confusedly at the woman, then at Amara, and then at the crowd, which began to murmur in agreement with the elderly woman's words. People were demanding justice, their voices growing louder, and the policeman realized he was no longer in control. He felt his face redden and his heart beat faster. The words of the old woman pointed out his injustice, and the crowd supported her, asking for Amara's release. The crowd began to close in, making a pressuring atmosphere around the policeman. A voice from the crowd asked if there was anyone who had witnessed what happened and could testify. Other voices shouted that they had recorded it and were ready with the video. Amara stood unwaveringly, looking directly at the policeman, while he felt his grip on the situation slipping. He realized he could no longer act as he pleased, that his every move was now under the watchful eyes of many people demanding justice. Finally, the policeman, visibly nervous and upset, had to remove the handcuffs. He did so with an expression as if it was the greatest insult of his life, as if he had lost a battle he believed he had already won. His fingers trembled while unlocking the cuffs. "You're free," he muttered, not looking at Amara or the crowd. Amara thanked him, but there was an ironic tone in her voice. "Thank you, officer. I hope you learn to be just." Her words were quiet, but they struck a powerful blow to the policeman's reputation, and he felt the impact. Amara raised her head and looked at the crowd, which began to applaud. It was a true moment of triumph, not because she had defeated someone, but because her truth and kindness had been acknowledged. He hastened to his car, his face refusing even to acknowledge all the other people around him. The police officer felt humiliated and powerless. Meanwhile, the crowd was clapping for Amara. People came up to her, thanked her for her courage, and encouraged her with words. Her bravery inspired others, and this support felt like a wave of goodness flowing through everyone present. The policeman, getting into his car, realized that his actions had been exposed to the public. All his arrogant words, his attempts to demonstrate power, now looked pathetic. He realized that this comic situation in which he had trapped himself with his arrogance would be remembered for a long time by many. He pressed the gas pedal, driving away from the scene as soon as possible, trying to leave this shameful moment behind. Amara stood and hugged the elderly lady she had saved. The people around her continued to applaud, some even coming forward to personally thank her. She was a little tired but deeply satisfied. The situation had been tough, yet she knew she had done right. The confidence, courage, the composure under pressure, all testified that even in the most difficult situations, justice could prevail. As the crowd finally dispersed, leaving Amara alone with the elderly woman, the girl felt the tension in her shoulders dissipate. Her heart was still pounding but was slowly going back to its normal rhythm. She took a deep breath, trying to regain control over her emotions, and smiled as she thanked the elderly woman she had helped across the road for her support and care. The old woman reached out and embraced Amara like an old friend. Tears of appreciation welled up in her eyes as she said quietly, "Child, you are a real hero. You did not deserve this. Thank you." Her voice shook with emotion. Amara felt the warmth in her heart from these words. Yes, she was sure she had acted correctly, though she stressed herself so much and suffered greatly. Support from strangers turned out to be a real source of inspiration for her, and those words were the greatest reward she could receive. Amara walked with the elderly woman to the bus stop and continued talking with her for some time. The elderly woman mentioned that she too had been victimized many years ago, but at that time, she did not have the opportunity to stand against the system. Her story was replete with pain and regret, but Amara listened because it was crucial to stand up for people who never had a voice in the past. They embraced each other as the older woman boarded the bus. Amara felt that her accidental encounter was really something deeper for them both. Following that, Amara decided to go home. She got into her old car, which was still parked by the side of the road, and felt the fatigue gradually wash over her. The seat, though a bit worn, now felt like the most comfortable place in the world. She sighed, looking at the evening city that was gradually sinking into darkness. The streets were slowly emptying, and the quiet streetlights illuminated her way home. Every street lamp she passed cast soft shadows on the road, and this sight, together with the evening stillness, seemed calming after such an intense day. Amara felt that this event was something more than just a conflict with the policeman. It was a symbol, a lesson she wanted to pass on to others. She had watched and learned that remaining silent against any form of injustice gave the oppression room to grow, something she wouldn't let happen. With each glimpse of that policeman's face and all his disdainful and arrogant look, a wave of resolution born anew in her body would flow through. She no longer wanted to be a victim, nor did she want other people to fall victim to the abuses of power. When she got home, her sister was already there, knowing what happened. The internet was flooding with the video of Amara standing up to the policeman. It had gone viral, and now everyone in their small town knew her name. Her sister hurried to her with open arms, as if protecting her from all the world's troubles. Amara felt the warmth and tenderness on her sister's shoulder that she so badly needed then. "Amara, I am so proud of you," her sister exclaimed, while smiling. Her voice quivered with excitement. "I just can't believe that you stood up like that. You are so brave." Her eyes shone bright with pride, while every word relayed genuine admiration. A wave of warmth rushed through Amara. She knew she did the right thing, and that her sister would always be there for her. Amara smiled, but deep inside her, she knew this was just the beginning. So many people had to go through such problems daily, and not everyone could raise their voices for their rights. Her mind was scattered, but she knew this incident could not be ignored. Thus, she decided not to stop at what had been achieved. She knew her voice, added to others, could change the world, even if but a step forward. The next morning, Amara woke up to the ringing of her phone. Her eyes were not yet used to the bright morning light as she fumbled for the phone on the nightstand. It was a journalist with a local newspaper wanting an interview. He spoke about how her story had inspired many people and that they wanted to share her story as widely as possible. Amara paused for a moment, surprised by such attention, but quickly agreed she wanted people to know that the fight against abuse of power should not remain solely in the hands of those in power. She knew her story could help others find their courage. Before the interview, she was a little anxious. Her sister helped her choose clothes and cheered her up, saying she would be able to convey her story to the people. Her sister brought her a cup of tea, and Amara, gazing at the steam, tried to gather all her thoughts. It seemed to her that this moment was very important, as if she had a mission to fulfill. She knew that she was now responsible not only for herself but for all those who faced similar injustices. When she arrived at the interview location, Amara saw that a small group of people had already gathered: local activists, journalists, concerned residents. They stood with signs that read "Justice for all" and "No abuse of power." The atmosphere was filled with tension but also determination. This was something more than just an interview. It was the beginning of a movement that might change the rules of the game. People had come to support her, and she felt their support with all her heart. Her eyes filled with warmth and gratitude, and she realized that this was a turning point. A young journalist, with an inspired look, approached her, extending his hand. He looked a bit tired, but the amount of enthusiasm in his eyes was enough to encourage Amara. "Amara, thank you for coming. We want your story to be an example for others so that people know they have the power to stand against injustice. It's extremely important." Amara looked at the people surrounding her, at the activists clutching their signs, the journalists getting ready to press camera buttons, and all these townspeople who came out in her support. A fire no one knew existed was lit within her chest. She knew this wouldn't be easy, but she finally felt that someone was listening, too, and it was just beginning. She started telling them, and people listened. In this, they were in receipt of every word. Her voice was calm but firm. Every word was an oozing confidence with the urge for justice. She spoke of the significance of each voice, how no one has a right to abuse the given power, and how every single being had strength to alter happenings around them. Amara's story began to spread across the country. People shared her video, supported her with words, and some even sent letters thanking her for her courage. She realized she had become a symbol for those who could not speak up. And though it was difficult for her, she was ready to keep going. Her mailbox was full of messages from strangers thanking her for giving them hope. They wrote that her example had inspired them and that they too had begun to fight for their rights in their communities. Every one of those messages gave her strength. This event changed not only her life but also the lives of many people in her town. People began discussing their rights, abuse of power, and even began gathering signatures for police reform. Amara became one of the organizers of such meetings. Her words inspired many. She headed the meetings where people discussed how they could change the system, how to make sure that such situations would not happen again. Her strength and confidence turned out to be an example for others, and she felt that their struggle meant something. Amara knew the struggle had only just begun. But then she was no longer alone. She had people supporting her, and that got her moving forward. She no longer felt alone in her struggle. Amara felt that her voice mattered, and even one person can change the world if they are not afraid to stand up against injustice. She realized that her journey was just beginning, but she was ready to walk it without looking back. And every day, she found new strength in those who stood beside her, in their eyes, in their words of support. She knew that together they could change a lot. After Amara gave her interview and met with activists, life changed even more. She was no longer a girl who stood up for justice. She was a symbol for a movement that was gaining momentum. The local news continued to cover her story, and numerous messages and letters from people all over the country came to her every day. Amara became part of something much greater than she could have ever imagined. Her face was now known, her name a symbol in this fight against injustice. Well, one day while getting ready for another meeting with activists, she received a call from one lawyer saying that he had been representing a group of human rights defenders who wanted to provide her with legal support in case harassment or threats happened again. Amara knew this was the way things had to be. One could only tease authority representatives so much before it bit back. She felt that attention to her was growing, and with it came danger. When she met with the lawyer, he explained that they not only wanted to make sure that she was safe, but helped her conduct a legal case against the policeman who had abused his powers. This could be a case setting a precedent for the whole country. Amara, said the lawyer, the serious look on his face not dissipating. With us together, we can win and show that the law is supposed to work for all of us. He told her about the complicated procedures and possible risks, but this step was important for society in general. Amara knew a great responsibility lay on her shoulders. Amara stopped for a second. She knew the legal process was an uphill, painful journey of its own that would stress her to new challenges and trials. Still, she also knew such could be an important turn in fighting against injustice. Her thoughts went back to a moment when she stood before that policeman, feeling helpless, and she knew that she should not let others also feel so. She looked at the lawyer and, with a determination within herself, replied, "I'm ready. We must do this for all those who didn't have the opportunity to defend themselves." The next few weeks were spent in constant meetings, consultations, and preparations for the trial. Amara understood that her life would never be the same. She had to meet with journalists wanting to learn more about her fight and with people who needed support and inspiration. She started to hold meetings in any place, in schools, community centers, on the streets, telling her story and asking people not to stay silent when faced with injustice. She echoed a resonance that reached the many, and with each one beginning to find their strength inside, it swelled in her heart with pride. One day, she received a message from a young girl named Layla who said that her story had given her the courage to stand up against bullies at school. Layla shared how she had long suffered from harassment by her classmates, but after seeing the video of Amara, she decided not to stay silent and told her teachers about her situation. Her teachers supported her, and the situation began to improve. It was one of those moments when Amara felt even the tiniest action might have a ripple effect on everything, and that her fight was not just about the court, but about inspiring others. This message became a great source of inspiration for Amara. She realized that her fight was not in vain. Every day when she spoke, every word she said mattered to someone. And even if her path was difficult, she was ready to keep walking it. Her actions found support and resonance among ordinary people, as well as those with the power to change things. One evening, on her way home from yet another meeting, Amara felt that she was being followed. There was this car behind her for some time now. Her heart started racing, but her mind told her to remain calm. She knew her activism hadn't gone unnoticed, and the things she had done had made those people who didn't want change very angry. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, and she kept her eyes forward in an attempt to compose herself. Amara decided not to drive home directly but to make a few extra rounds of the streets to make sure that the car was indeed following her. She remembered all the advice the lawyer had given her in case of danger. Her hands gripped the wheel so tightly her fingers turned white, and her eyes focused on the road ahead. The car was still behind her. The pursuer's headlights, of course, made her even more nervous, but she knew she had to remain calm. Finally, she saw a police station on one of the corners and, without hesitation, turned towards it. The car that had been following her suddenly stopped and made a sharp turn, disappearing in the opposite direction. Amara felt a sense of relief, but along with it, an awareness that her fight was becoming increasingly dangerous. She felt the tension leave her shoulders, but she also realized that this situation was not accidental. She went to the police station and reported what had happened. The police took her statement and said they would investigate, but Amara felt this time she couldn't rely on them alone. She needed to be prepared for anything. She phoned her lawyer, who advised her to be careful and always report any suspicious situations. He further advised her to install other security measures at home and to be in constant contact with her loved ones. Amara knew her journey was not going to be smooth, but at the same time, she felt strong with so many people standing by her and her crusade. She was fighting not for herself but for all those who could not raise their voices against injustice. She felt responsible for every person who followed her example and was ready to keep going despite all obstacles. Her determination only grew stronger, and each new day she dedicated herself to changing the world around her. The next day, Amara got another message, this time from one man named James, who worked in the local government. He wrote that her story had touched many in their city, and that they were starting to contemplate the instatement of new regulations to monitor police activity. He invited her to a meeting to discuss possible changes and how they could work together on this. This news was like a ray of light amidst all the trials she had faced. Amara realized her fight was starting to bring real results. She knew this was just the beginning, but with every step, they were closer to changing things. And though she was scared, she felt that she was doing the right thing. She agreed to the meeting and that very day started preparing for the discussion of important questions that could change the situation in their city. Her path was not easy, but she was ready to continue walking it, for herself and for all those who believed in her. At the meeting with James and his colleagues, Amara impressed them with her determination and deep understanding of the problem. She not only voiced her vision for change but also proposed concrete steps to improve the system of police accountability. Independent oversight, a citizens' committee that would evaluate law enforcement performance, and educational programs for police officers on how to work with the community. James listened to her with admiration. He realized that in front of him stood not a victim of circumstances but a leader ready to take responsibility and lead people. He promised to do everything possible to make her proposals be considered at the highest level. Then they shook hands, and Amara felt she had taken another step forward on her path to change. When she came out of the building where the meeting had taken place, journalists were waiting for her. They asked about her plans, about possible changes, and Amara shared her experience with them. She saw how the people around her began to believe in change, and that gave her strength. She knew that her fight was ongoing and that there were still many challenges ahead, but now she was more ready than ever.